Knew that was going to happen. Good morning. I think it's okay. First, I have to tell you how happy my heart is to be here in this room, in this space, with all of you again. I believe I last spoke here in 2015. It's been a very long time. It's always been a gift to be in this community, this really, truly authentic community, a place where people don't just gather together, but where people find acceptance and compassion and welcome and grace, the kind of place that people need today more than ever. I am passionate about community. I've been working to create safe, authentic community for marginalized and voiceless people for most of my life. These days, I do that at the Momentum Center, and I do it with your help. I'm so delighted. I'm always delighted to see the engagement of people from C3 in our work at the Momentum Center. You have raised funds and had special collections for our community. You have attended in-person events and virtual conversations. You have volunteered your time and your expertise. Our paths have intersected and complemented each other in many places and in many ways over the years, and I am truly, truly grateful. I also believe there's so much more work we could do together, and that the more we work together, the more we'll keep gaining momentum. And that is so important because the work of the Momentum Center is incredibly rewarding, but it is not easy. I'm going to share a few example with you from a few weeks ago. It was one of those so hard to find the right balance days. This particular day, Annie was at the Momentum Cafe. Now, Annie isn't her real name, but that's not important. What is important is that Annie is a beautiful human being. She loves music. She loves routine and structure. She loves her mom, and her mom loves her. That is so obvious. Annie also lives with autism, an extreme form of autism that leaves her hypersensitive to touch and unable to communicate verbally. Annie is often calm. She rocks gently when she is content. This morning, she was not content. She was loud. She was loud and inarticulate and really, really loud. And any attempt to try to get her to calm down would have just exacerbated the situation. Annie was involved in the community-based instruction through Grand Haven area high schools, through the public school system, until she turned 26. That's the age at which everybody must age out of that program. So somebody who'd been completely dependent on routine had the whole foundation of her existence stripped away from her. Annie doesn't have any coping mechanisms, so her mother has to try to cope for her. Annie would cry and wail day after day, missing her friends, missing her structure. Before we even opened, Annie's mother was calling to see if this was a program that possibly Annie could attend. The Momentum Center offers a safe, welcoming place to people with developmental disabilities and mental illnesses and addictions, a place where we can all embrace our common humanity. It costs $1 a year to join and participate in everything we offer. No diagnosis or referral is needed. We screen to make sure that you can safely engage in the program. Sometimes someone like Annie joins, someone who needs a supports person. She has to bring her supports person with her. We can't offer that level of supervision, but we can offer a safe, welcoming community for people who otherwise would have none. A safe place for people like Annie. And a safe place for people like Angie, who just got out of the hospital after trying to end her own life. And for people like Jerry, who just need to feel that there's some kind of purpose and meaning in their life. And people like Pat, who find that they're able to stay away from alcohol when they have a place in a company of people who hold them accountable. Even a place for people like Hal, who has a criminal record and deserves to be recognized for something other than the worst thing he's ever done in his life. And people like my son Alex, who lives with schizophrenia and has blossomed because of community. Because people have various kinds of needs and one size doesn't fit all, we also offer affinity groups for stay-at-home moms, for healthcare providers, and for the LGBTQ plus community. We lead life skill classes at Central High School and at the alternative high school for Spring Lake, offering teenagers opportunities to cope with stress, anxiety, and depression while building skills and healthy relationships and resiliency. And we've started offering programming in Holland. The Momentum Center fills that giant gap in the continuum of care between the individual and clinical services. We provide a place to fill your behavioral health needs. When a therapist says, get some exercise, eat right, and spend time in community, there's actually a place people can go to do that. We are literally saving lives. And our research partners, including then Atlas, Community Mental Health, North Ottawa Healthcare, Pine Rest, and Michigan State University, are helping us collect that data so that we have the background to back the data to back it up. We know that we are creating a statistically significant decrease in depression, anxiety, and loneliness, and a statistically significant increase in social connectedness. And of course, anecdotally, there are many times I can tell you about those moments where we know we have saved another life. One of our most recent findings is that for every $1 that we receive from the mental health millage in this community, we are saving community mental health $4. That means we're saving them $1 million a year. In 2022, we'll be testing an intervention developed by Michigan State University that will help teach our members skills and techniques for emotional regulation. The Momentum Center is the safety net in this community. It exists to connect people in need of clinical care, and it also exists so that therapists can tell their clients that there's a place to go to get their needs met, that a client has a home and a place of community. It exists to help with all of those hours in between therapeutic appointments, and it exists to help people with mental illness, addictions, and developmental disabilities to strengthen their own resiliency and master the tools that will help them no matter what stresses occur in their lives. But that's not all the Momentum Center does. We're a grassroots movement to create a stigma-free community. Our vision is that everybody would be and would know that they are a valuable piece of the community puzzle. We actively practice inclusion and value radical diversity. We recognize, celebrate, and nurture what C3 calls our common humanity. The Momentum Center started by hosting town halls, community conversations, and we still do that. We engage in dialogue about social justice and human rights, including Inspire events, which we will resume whenever COVID allows us to do that, and town hall meetings on mental illness. And in the summer of 2020, when we realized that COVID was disproportionately affecting communities of color, we convened the Anti-Racism Task Force and began a series of town halls on race and racism. Our town hall meetings are not debates, but opportunities for people with divergent views, opinions, and experiences to engage each other in respectful dialogue, recognizing that we all have preconceived ideas and we all have hot spots and get triggered unintentionally. We call on participants to take ownership of their own thoughts and their emotions and their reactions and to practice active listening. It's our belief that the ability to have these kinds of open, honest conversations are critical for the well-being of our community, particularly as we strive to create a place where everyone belongs. And finally, we lead cultural immersion experiences. They're not vacations or mission trips, but true deep dives into other cultures. A number of people in the C3 community have been on those trips. And once COVID restrictions are lifted, we will resume our experiences in China, Tibet, Kenya, Egypt, and Honduras. In the meantime, we're putting together cultural immersion across the bridge, working to address the cultural and racial disparities between the Grand Haven community and Muskegon. And I'm really excited that in April, we're going to host our first civil rights road trip as we journey by bus to the Museum of Peace and Justice and other civil rights sites in Alabama and Tennessee. Everything we do is about interacting with people from all different backgrounds, with all different views and perspectives, which means we both expect and encourage a degree of disagreement and discomfort. You here at C3 are all too aware of the polarization in our society and how that plays out in our families, our neighborhoods, and in our work environments. At a time when we need each other more than ever, we are spending less time really listening to each other and more time reinforcing our own worldviews and disengaging from those who have different life experiences, different beliefs, and different approaches than we do. We instead make the deliberate choice time after time after time to lean into those differences, which plays out in some really remarkably interesting ways. For instance, every February until COVID, we hosted an event that centered on celebrating all love. One year, we followed that with an Inspire event on gender roles. I was contacted by somebody who was offended by that idea of having that very conversation and wondered who was going to present for traditional gender roles. So I explained to him that typically we don't need somebody to present the common experience in our culture, the role of privilege, if you will. He didn't agree. But I chose to listen to him and to invite him into conversation. We still don't agree on that topic. There's much we don't agree on. But this is somebody who continues to stay engaged. He attends many of our events, many of our town halls right now on race and racism. He's even come by to pick up a book and read something that I've suggested to him. And while we still feel very differently about many things, he is still engaged in the conversation. That's where the possibilities exist. That's where change can occur. I firmly believe nothing changes outside of our relationships. It's all relational. So how do we nurture relationships that respect how we feel and think and believe, but also can respect others and move us into that space of genuine dialogue and authentic sharing? Not only is he engaged in the conversation, but he's a dependable volunteer who comes and helps out whenever we have a need at the facility. Another example happened virtually during our town hall on racism in the educational system. I saw disparate opinions start popping up on the chat, and I was so excited because they were met with respect and civility. Never did that conversation succumb to name-calling, belittling, shaming, any of the things you see on Facebook. It was the very model of what we've been striving to create. And afterward, I got an email from a participant telling me that he had attended with his 10-year-old daughter. His understanding going in was that we were a leftist organization, and so he would have to debrief his daughter afterward about everything that had gone on. He said that his experience was much different than he expected, and that what he found instead was a sincere desire to listen to different perspectives and to welcome different points of view. I couldn't have been happier to hear him explain it that way, because that is what we're trying to accomplish. Not trying to position ourselves as an organization of the left, and certainly not of the right, but an organization that believes that if we're going to address the issues in society, we have to find a way to integrate divergent points of view and lived experience. So the Momentum Center in that respect strives to be an integral organization. Time and time again, we've demonstrated that once we understand that our life experiences are genuinely different and that we genuinely see the world through a different lens, we can stop being so defensive. And we start to understand that we all play a role in maintaining these troublesome systems that were put in place generations ago. We have to begin unpacking the role we play ourselves in maintaining and sustaining those systems, consciously and unconsciously, because no one else is going to fix this for us. What is society if it's not us? We have to make this personal because we're the only ones who can bring about change. I am white, cisgendered, straight, middle class, able-bodied, and English-speaking. I'm married, have 2 sons, a stepdaughter-ish, the most adorable grandson in the entire world. It is true. I'm an ordained interfaith minister, an author, an international speaker. I am a woman of privilege. In lots of ways, I'm a woman of privilege. And I'm so grateful for a journey that has at least made me aware of a degree of that privilege. I remember a couple of specific steps of that journey took place in 3rd grade. One of them happened at school. I remember my teacher talking, and I'm really old. So this was during the whole Cold War thing, and we were still having drills where we had to hide under our desk in case the bomb was dropped. And I remember our teacher telling us about these people in Russia that we needed to be afraid of. And for some reason, it occurred to me that there were children right then in Russia who were being told that I was somebody that they needed to be afraid of. The other experience happened at my church. I was raised in a pretty liberal Lutheran church, but we were talking, the message had to do with people who hadn't heard about Jesus and how we needed to tell people about Jesus. And Jesus was a great guy. I'm all for telling people about Jesus. But the concern was that there were people who had never heard about him and what was going to happen. And I was fine with the response in my church because it was that God loves those people, and if they've never heard, everything will be fine. My concern was, what about those kids in China who have a different faith, who believe something different? And if I were going to go and try to take that away from them, to replace it with my faith, that seemed like it would be an act of violence. I wouldn't want somebody to try to take my faith away from me. So those were kind of the moments that made me start thinking about this idea of social change. My career path has been winding and insightful. I started out in medical administration at the same time that I was healing from an abusive first marriage. I was able to use that experience to form the Muskegon County Domestic Violence Healthcare Initiative. But even with that accomplishment, I decided I really had to do work that made a difference in people's lives instead of worrying about physician reimbursement. So I went back to school to get my master's degree and to move into nonprofit administration. When I did that, I started working as the first full-time director of Habitat for Humanity in Muskegon County, working with people who were struggling with homelessness and poverty for all manner of reasons. It was through my exposure there to Millard Fuller and Clarence Jordan and Jimmy Carter that I started asking myself, how much does any one person really need? And began to reduce my footprint on the world. Next, I felt this call into ministry. I was working as an assistant to the bishop. I was part of the church's anti-racism team, and I received Crossroads training, and that was incredibly important in my life journey because the impact of that has stayed with me forever. And the person who made the most impact on me was Ken Pons, a friend, a black pastor, who told me in the middle of this training that every day he needs to look in the mirror and decide where it's safe to go and where it's not safe to go. And as a young person, just kind of understanding these situations in our world, it really struck me. It was the first time I became aware of the issue of racism not just being individual, but really being systemic, really being something that filters through everything we do in this country. I was also a part of the church when it was conducting sexuality studies. When I became a mission developer and started my own ministry, we became the first open and affirming congregation in our synod. And I had the great privilege of becoming friends with people like Marty as she transitioned in her own gender identity. Of course, there were always plenty of challenges in that work. One morning I had to preach at 2 services at Gethsemane Lutheran, and there was an adult study in between. So I preached at one service, and then I went to the adult study, and I had just been talking about how the church was doing these sexuality studies, and there was total silence. I could not get anybody in this adult group to say anything. And finally, a young man, and it was particularly painful because he was young, stood up and looked me in the eye and said, "This church has been going downhill ever since I started ordaining women." And nobody countered that. And I still had a second sermon to preach. My own ministry, Extended Grace, started at GT Bones on US 31. After the restaurant closed, Wicked Ways, body piercing and tattoos moved in. And I loved that. These were the most incredible people ever. And I thought the best one-line sermon in the whole world was when I got to tell people that they had to walk through Wicked Ways to get to Extended Grace. My focus in this work was always on marginalized people. And in this community, as you well know, a lot of marginalization happens because of religion. We welcomed and celebrated religious diversity, as you do, from all different faiths, from no faith, from every philosophy. We welcomed and celebrated that diversity, which means ultimately we lost the support of the church. And I went back to work in the nonprofit world. First, by working at a methadone clinic, helping people with substance abuse disorder by leading support groups and being able to provide free Reiki treatments. It's amazing when you can serve people with free Reiki. Then working for Can Do, helping people with disabilities, mental illness, and criminal records find gainful employment. It was important work, but the scope was just a little too narrow for me. So I started writing my 2 books, and I excitedly accepted the interim leader position here at C3, while planning a public speaking career. I began talking in colleges about healthy sexuality and replacing a marriage ethic with a sexual ethic. Unfortunately, just as that speaking career was taking off, my son Alex got terribly ill. His schizophrenia could not be denied or explained away in any way. And it took about 5.5 months to get him stabilized and to find the right medication. I realized that there was no way I could have a job that would take me away from home most of the year. So I lobbied for the opportunity to be able to continue here at C3, and I was heartbroken when my contract just wouldn't allow it. I loved it here, and I was devastated to lose this community. The next phase of my life was the most confusing I had ever faced. I had always gone where I was called, and no one and nothing was calling me. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with me. So I started a nonprofit, figuring I would try to help other people who wanted to make a difference connect with opportunities to do that. And I'd look for gaps in the system, places where I might be able to bring energy and resourcefulness to improve things. So I ended up leading the Momentum Center because really, there wasn't anything else I could do. And now, as I return as a guest at C3, I invite you to join me in my work. The work that you helped commission. The Tri-Cities community needs me, and it needs you. You and I are uniquely situated to see the thread of common humanity that weaves through society, and to use it to sew together the strong fabric of care and compassion that can support people when they have no strength left, when they cannot find resources, when their struggle is lonely and overwhelming. In this time of COVID, we're continuing to see mental illness increase across every sector and every demographic. Before COVID, 1 in 10 adults reported feeling anxiety or depression. Midway through the pandemic, Kaiser Family Fund was finding 4 out of 10, an increase of 4-fold adults reporting anxiety and depression. We also know that substance use and suicidal ideation is off the charts with our young people. You can help during this time of crisis by destigmatizing mental illness. When someone asks you how you're doing, give them an honest answer. If you're hurting, if you're struggling, let them know. And if you're doing fine or better than fine, share what you're doing, which is helping. What is helping you maintain your well-being? And when you ask somebody how they're doing, ask with genuine curiosity, genuine interest. Be willing to hear an honest answer. If they're struggling, don't minimize their struggle or think you have to resolve it or make it go away. Just let them know that you're there with them. Let them know they aren't alone. Normalize the conversation. And when you encounter people in need of positive community, invite them here to C3, as I know you're already doing, and invite them to check out the Momentum Center. We're literally just down the street. I have no sense of direction whatsoever. And if you want to become involved in our work, there are so many ways you can do that as individuals and as an organization. You can volunteer, you can sponsor events, you can donate to our work, you can stop by and add something to our micro pantry. It's open 24/7. You can donate used computers to our Equip program so Chase can repair them and we can get them into the hands of people who need them. You can stop into the Momentum Cafe, pick up a fair trade gift. By the way, we're closing in the depot. In the depot. I'm getting different. Wherever the depot is, we're moving out of it. We moved there in September a year ago. And again, because of COVID, we've lost so much of our volunteer staff that we can't sustain our work there and make money. And the whole idea of a social enterprise is to help a nonprofit, not to cost a nonprofit. So we'll be closing the end of this month and moving curated items back to the Momentum Cafe. So stop there, pick up a fair trade gift, enjoy a French press coffee by yourself or with a friend. You will experience firsthand what a stigma-free community is all about. And Annie just might be there when you visit. That day at the Momentum Center was hard because Annie is struggling. And there's no easy answer to that struggle. It was hard because Annie isn't the only member in the building, and we have to try to create a safe place for everyone who's there. It was hard because we couldn't simply redirect Annie. It was hard because we see the struggle on her mother's face, and she worries that this will be one more place where Annie is not welcome. Our challenge is to make sure Annie always has a place to go. But we can't do that without help. Today, more people are struggling than ever before, and our members require a higher level of care than they needed in the past. The people of this community need us. They need the Momentum Center, and they need C3, because for so many people, life is simply hard. As we find new and creative ways to work together, we will keep gaining momentum. Namaste.